Hi, Steve Nash here. Welcome to my weekly update. What caught my eye in the news this week? Saw an interesting article about the kickback there has been on moving all of the sort of key driver controls in a car onto a screen, and how some are moving back towards, and there's a sort of movement, if you like, back towards knobs and buttons and haptic controls and so on. I think it's interesting. But before I jump into that, let's just go back to where all of that started. If you go back to the mid 80s, early 90s, that was the point in time when cars started to become intensely electronic. Also, as it happens, the point in time when I left the BMW dealer network to join BMW GB, as it was then, BMW UK today. And it also coincided with the launch of a new 7 Series, which was our first really intensely electronic car, with all sorts of driver systems, information systems and so on, interactive systems on board, through what we called back then an MMI, or a man-machine interface, a screen basically, which had a lot of, but it was a lot of systems on board, but that was all achieved with conventional wiring. So much so that the wiring harness, the entire wiring loom, consisted of well north of 2,000 individual wires with countless connector blocks and so on, all very complex. It was a sea change. For those who were around at the time, they would tell you it was a sea change, because when I left the dealer network only a short time earlier, the operation I was running had workshop with about 17 technicians in, a bunch of apprentices, of course, because I was very committed to that. And we had a couple of auto electricians. That was the way of things. The bulk of the work was mechanical. You had a couple of electricians who would do things like radio fitting, alarms and so on, and help out with the odd electrical problem that might occur on cars that came in. But that had to change, because with the cars being so intensely electronic, everybody had to have an understanding of that technology, of electrics and electronics. And hence the change of name from mechanic to technician, which I believe we were the first people to coin that term in order to describe the change that had happened. I stand to be corrected, but at the very least, we were very much in the vanguard of it. And this required a completely new set of skills. And I've got to say, those early cars were challenging. Because they threw up problems the like of which we'd not seen before. We had some pretty unique problems that just related to right-hand drive cars. For example, I remember that you had quite a lot of controls, obviously, on and around the steering wheel. Even that was quite new, actually, putting buttons and things onto the steering wheel. But that all had to be transposed to the right, and for a right-hand drive car, of course. And all the wires that went into those controls had to be taken across the dashboard to the steering wheel on the other side, because they all kind of came in on the left. That necessitated a rather large bunch of wires running behind the dashboard across to where the steering wheel was, which meant that when we put radios in, they wouldn't work because they just picked up interference, alternator whine and other issues, which was a crazy problem to have, but it was one that was quite complex to resolve. We did resolve it, but it was, you can imagine, on those early cars that people were receiving, they were not too happy to find out that the radios weren't working properly. So we had to work feverishly and hard to get that sorted. And there were many, many other things that were thrown up. I think if you talk to anybody who was around at that time, whether it was with BMW or Mercedes and others who kind of joined the fray later, at Audi, of course, we all had the same issue, the same sorts of issues. And then jump forward to the next generation. And by the way, that wiring loom that I was talking about was super heavy. I mean, it was one of the heaviest components. If you put it all together with all the connector blocks and everything, it weighed sort of up to 60 plus kilograms. One of the heaviest components in the car. So jump forward to the next generation, and we saw the introduction of bus systems, the CAN bus, multiplexing. So instead of, for example, on that earlier 7 Series where we had something like 17 wires running into the door for the sort of door module that had all of the window switches and other things on it, you now only had 2 wires going in there because you were sending, you were sending coded signals rather than literally having to power each of those different switches and so on. So that was a big change, big weight saving. And actually, of course, in the goodness of time, we moved on to fibre optic multiplexing for a lot of systems, which took away some more weight and some more complexity. But then you jump forward into the early 2010s, and largely initiated by our friends at Tesla, who have been the initiators of quite a lot of change, haven't they, over the last 10 or 15 years. We saw this, that they were the first to introduce a situation where you had no buttons or knobs or anything. You just had a big iPad type screen. And the beauty of that from an engineering perspective is it massively reduces complexity. It takes away lots of components, switches and buttons and knobs. I mean, yes, it further reduces wiring and so on in many cases, although the big weight savings and things had been achieved with multiplexing and fibre optics and so on. But even so, the other great thing, though, is that because everything's centered in the screen, there's no difference between a right and a left-hand drive car. Updating things is really easy, done over the air. You can introduce new features with ease. You can put features behind paywalls. You can say to people, well, I mean, that did happen. Bit controversial at times, wasn't it? I think people were receiving cars with features that then disappeared and you had to pay to retain them, things like heated seats and stuff like that. That's a whole other debate. But nevertheless, you can see where the attraction came from to move in that direction. But I think that a lot of people have found that they aren't entirely happy with everything being buried somewhere in a menu on a screen. I think as well, I mean, look, I will own up here and say that I'm not the biggest fan of touch screens. I'm not wholly against them, but I think they have their place. I think actually if you're driving a right-hand drive vehicle and you're right-handed, which the vast majority of us are, you're not using your primary digits to operate any of those functions. And it's difficult sometimes to get exactly what you're trying to get without looking at what you're doing. And that introduces an element of risk. I'll give you a little anecdote, actually. Perfectly true. I bought a new car for my wife a couple of years ago, which has all of its functions in a screen. So it does have a few buttons here and there, but the majority of the core functions are in the screen. And in fact, you also, to really get the best out of it, you need to use the app, which is something my wife is not really prepared to do. I'm sure she's not alone on that. And I don't think that's just a female thing. That's another consideration, but, I don't want to go off necessarily down digress down that alley just now. But again, the really interesting thing is, though, that the sales process was pretty good, but the car had to be delivered from London to just north of Norfolk, where I live. And it was duly delivered. A couple of days later, I got a phone call from the salesman who said to me, how did it go? Was the delivery good? Are you happy with the car and everything? Yeah, all good. And he said, then what about the handover? And I said to him, well, look, let me tell you that the chap who delivered the car, it was a hot day. It was sort of late August, early September, pretty hot day, had driven all the way from wherever the car was stored, all the way to North Norfolk with all the windows open, because he didn't know how to turn on the air conditioning. And because there was no AC button or knob or whatever to turn the fan on and up and down. So, I mean, that's what he'd done. So he was hardly likely to give me a great handover, was he? And left it to me to work these things out for myself and to also work out, how to do the interface with the app and everything else. I think that, but that kind of exemplifies what the core problem is. When you've got sort of basic key functions that you want to use every day, that are in a touchscreen, or sometimes not in a primary menu. You know, if you have to search for how to turn your heated seats on and off or whatever, it's clearly less than ideal. So I think it's good that we're seeing a step back towards some physical controls. Actually, I mean, in order to sort of reduce the complication that was I mean, again, you know, other end of the telescope here, the more systems that we started to introduce through the 90s, the more complicated potentially it was becoming. I mean, if everything had to have its own button or its own knob, that just wasn't practical. BMW's answer to that at the time was to introduce the iDrive. Now, most people are unlikely to remember that the first iteration of the iDrive was a bit of a mess, to be honest with you. It was well intentioned, but it really didn't work very well. It was over complex and difficult to use. It got panned a bit by the motoring press. Total credit to the engineers. They went back to the drawing board and came up with a new iDrive, which has been in BMW cars since the sort of early mid-90s, right the way up until very recently. It was great. It really, I've driven countless cars with iDrive. And it really enabled you to do all the things you wanted to do very easily and intuitively whilst driving, and without looking at what you were doing. You could make things happen quite instinctively once you got the hang of the control, which took very little time or effort. I mean, sadly, they don't have the iDrive anymore. But having said that, on the Neue class, or new class of vehicles, which began with the iX3 and follow up with the i3 and the new X5 and so on going forward, they do definitely have physical controls. I think a lot of those functions have moved to the steering wheel, and they certainly haven't done away, although they've got lots of screens in the car, they haven't done away with buttons altogether. So I'm sure they'll have put a lot of thought into that. But I mean, let me know what you think. I believe that it's, as in most things, you know, that there's a tendency sometimes for the pendulum to swing too far in one direction, and what you really need is a sort of balance. And I think that I think that's where we're headed. I hear as well that Euro NCAP are looking for certain functions as a minimum to be on knobs, buttons, or stalks or whatever, in order to give the highest safety ratings. That'll be a driver of certain directions as well, won't it? Well, let's as I say, let's see how that develops. But I'll be interested to know what you think. Now, I want to just change tack a little bit. I'll shortly be releasing the first of my podcast series, my new podcast series, Future Proof, which you can see on here. What is that aimed at? Well, look, first of all, we have a very diverse industry. When I was at the IMI, I discovered that there were, I don't know, I haven't done a recent count, but there were 48 trade bodies in the automotive industry, which is just an indication of how diverse and varied our industry is. Our industry of sort of 800,000-ish people. And it's interesting that you know, when you look at that, the perspectives, I mean, we're all going through the same change. We're all experiencing, you know, the sea change, moving from internal combustion engines to electrification, and of course, you know, other new technologies such as ADAS and the move towards greater autonomy or autonomous systems. But we won't all have exactly the same perspective. And I think it's interesting to talk to key people from different levels in the industry and from different sectors and subsectors to get their view on what the threats and the opportunities are, and how they're seeing the challenges from where they sit. And with that in mind, I mean, I have a number of these episodes in the can, and I talk to some very interesting sort of people in leadership positions. But my very first podcast, which is due for release imminently, is with a young lady called Megan Andrews. And Megan is just about to complete her second year of an engineering degree. And she's an extraordinary young lady. She's absolutely passionate about the automotive industry. She organized and ran her school's F24 program, where they built and ran an electric car at the Lotus test track not too far from here up in Norfolk. And she still, although she's moved on to university and is doing her engineering degree, she still mentors the teams back at her old school who are continuing that project. And she's mad on Formula One. Big fan of Lewis Hamilton and Oscar Piastri, as it happens. Very, very keen to be in the industry. And I think that the interesting thing is looking at things. She was described as a unicorn even by her senior lecturer. So in her entire cohort, she's one of very few females. And I know that lots of effort has been made to get more females into STEM subjects and into engineering, particularly. And we talk about this a lot. When you see it from her perspective, despite all the things we've done and continue to do to encourage more females into the industry, it's pretty hard. It's pretty hard for her. I mean, she hasn't found many. She hasn't found any doors to be open as such yet. Now, I've committed to try and help her as best I can, but she's made overtures to a number of organizations to see if she can get work experience or internships, and obviously hoping to make some connections that will lead to employment as she completes her degree and potentially goes on to something higher. But so far, no takers at all. And that's really rather sad. And I'm committed to helping her, but I hope that she's interesting to listen to. I hope that when somebody out there views the podcast, we might get somebody come forward and say, hey, look, I'd be interested in this young lady. So I commend that to you. I hope it will be releasing it imminently, as I said, and I'll trail that through social media and everything else. And I hope you will pick that up and have a look and let me know what you think. And let me know. I mean, as I said, I've got several others in the can, and I'm talking to various other people who I'm looking to do podcasts with. But as I said, let me know what you think, and give me some ideas of who you would like me to talk to, because there may be some that I haven't thought of. I'm sure there will be. Okay, thanks for listening. I will see you next week.